I mean, it's very clear that these guys do not have even concepts of a plan. But I do want to say that this is worse than inaction. It was actively actions that led us to this point. If you recall, on July 4th, the president signed the big ugly bill, and it included $1.5 trillion in cuts to the healthcare system. It gutted Medicaid, it gutted Medicare, and it set into motion the current crisis that we're in because they were actively discussing whether or not to reauthorize the Affordable Care Act subsidies that are expiring right now at the end of this month. And they chose not to do so. And every single one of those Republicans that you just mentioned voted against it. They voted to gut healthcare. And so it's not just that they didn't take action, they explicitly chose to basically tank our healthcare system. So no, they have headed us into this crisis. This was at the heart of the shutdown. They had months during the shutdown negotiations to actually work on some sort of plan. And Mike Johnson instead chose to keep the House of Representatives out of session for 54 days and wouldn't even bring members back to Washington, D.C. to even have discussions. So this is completely a crisis that they have manufactured. And now they're in a panic and a tailspin because not only are millions of Americans going to lose health care, but because it has consequences for them for putting us in this crisis to begin with.
So in my next segment, I'm going to talk about affordability, which has really come back to bite Republicans because people do seem to vote in favor of affordability irrespective of their political ideology. And that's the same thing with health care. This is hitting people who are not necessarily Democrats or it might be Republicans. In fact, it's hitting Republican states disproportionately. At some point, you've got to imagine Mike Johnson and your Republican colleagues there are doing this math, as we've seen some are.
Well, I mean, listen, part of the whole heart of this crisis and the big ugly bill is that there was no logic to how these cuts to these programs got put into place to begin with. Like, if you think there's some sort of master plan to either fix or break the system, what they're doing is completely nonsensical because these cuts are going to affect every American, whether or not you're on private insurance, employer-supported insurance, Medicaid, Medicare, or the Affordable Care Act exchanges. When you take that much money out of the system and you take out the supports that make a viable marketplace and insurance pool possible, you cause healthcare to either collapse or for prices to skyrocket. And that's why in the data that you just showed, healthcare is going up for everybody. They created this crisis, and the president with his tariffs, the job market, the stock market bubble that may be burst in the coming months. I mean, this isn't just an affordability crisis. The United States is in a very precarious position with respect to the economy, the job market, and just the ability of everyday Americans to afford housing, healthcare, food. And this is a true crisis, and the Republicans seem to have no plan to get us out of it.